Today, we have something a little different for you. Over the next several weeks, we will be showcasing our top 5 episodes of all time. Enjoy the episode and be sure to join us next week to hear the rest.
You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right, everybody, it's Daniel Barrett. I'm here with the world-famous David Bokman. David, how are you, man? What's going on?
I'm doing fabulous. But I couldn't have asked for a better intro. Wow. I don't know.
That's how I just so you know, that's how I intro everyone on the show. So,
I still feel special.
All right. Well, you were just saying, like right before we jumped on, that you just spoke at Drexel University. So what was that about? Like, why were you speaking there?
Yeah, so I have, somebody that I know. I wouldn't say that they're a friend of mine, but they're a colleague, someone that's in the real estate world that I've met recently over, the last few months. And they're actually a professor at Drexel University. They teach a real estate finance class, which, to be quite honest with you, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a real estate finance class.
Yeah.
So I was super humbled for him to ask me to speak. But basically part of his curriculum is to bring in people from various different areas of the real estate world and just have them talk about their background, how they got started, and the area of real estate that they play, and just kind of answer some questions. So I was super humbled to be able to do that last week.
That's cool. Were there a lot of people in the class?
There was about 30 people, and I had quite a good amount of questions being asked afterwards. And the funny thing is that, there was another speaker who spoke after me, somebody who's been in the real estate industry way longer than me, a business owner, owns a brokerage. I mean, we're talking high net worth individual. I enjoyed his story, but he had maybe 2 questions asked afterwards. So it felt good that, I got them engaged and they were asking a lot of questions. And it was really just a humbling experience for me to be able to share my story.
Yeah, you won the popular vote. That's why I like that.
Yeah. No, apparently nobody wanted to hear about selling houses and stuff like that. So I did win.
Well, let's take a step back. So for, I gave you sort of the funny intro at the beginning, but so for people that are listening, right, you are David Bokman, which is Bokman, just in case anybody wants to go and Google you after this point. And you're from PhillyHomeInvestor.com. So my usual question when I start off with doing these things is like, where are you investing and why? Like, how'd you get started? But I'm going to go ahead and guess that you are in Philadelphia. So, are you like investing like in the actual city itself? Or are you kind of in the suburbs? Like, where's your basic area of business?
Yeah, so obviously with the name, obviously we're going after Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a fairly large city, so there's lots of pockets. But to answer your question, my main target is the entire county of Philadelphia and also the surrounding counties, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Bucks County. So I'm in the city and I'm also in smaller pockets. There's a lot of opportunity zones. And I'm also in the suburbs. There's plenty of opportunity all over my market. So I try to be everywhere as much as possible. But Philly is definitely the main area.
Cool. And about half of the AdWords Nerds team is in Bucks County for some reason. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. And that's awesome to be able to work with a group that's local. That's been great.
Go to their houses and beat them up if they don't do a good job. That's how I manage the team. So how did you get your start investing? Well, let's kind of like take a step back. Well, actually, I'm going to take a step back even further. So right now, what kind of investing are you doing? You're like wholesaling, you flipping, like what's your basic business model?
Yeah. So right now, I would say 95% of my business is wholesaling. It's a little bit different than most, I would say, because not only do we focus on your typical residential houses, but we also focus on commercial properties, large multi-unit. We just closed on a 33-unit deal, vacant land and development deals. So that's 90 to 95% of my business is wholesaling. The other 5-10%, I do have 2 flips going on. So I am actively buying if the numbers make sense.
Right.
And then I also do a little bit of consultation work, just given my background, which I'll happy to go over as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I want to come back to that. But I was going to say, like, you have the balance that I think when I talk to investors, I hear a lot of the time some variation on, what I want to do is, I want to do a flip when it's right and when the numbers really line up, but the rest of the stuff I just want to wholesale. So it seems like that's kind of the balance that you have. You take the stuff that the kind of like cherry pick deals for yourself, and the rest you can wholesale to other investors.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk, and I can touch on that when we talk about how I got involved. But when I originally first got involved in real estate, I thought that I was going to be a flipper, like a lot of people think that they're going to do. And then I really quickly realized that wholesaling is the way to go. But when I originally first got involved in real estate, I was actively looking for flips was the mindset, but very, very quickly realized that wholesaling is a much better strategy.
Well, so break that down for me for your reasoning, because I feel like recently, right, there's been a real kind of rise in competition, right? Just kind of nationally. And I think that's kind of squeezed a lot of people in terms of what they're paying per lead, no matter what their marketing channel, right? That competition is very real. And so I feel like wholesaling's kind of taken a bit of hit in popularity just because people are like, well, I'm not making as much and I'm paying more for my leads. So for you, like, what makes wholesaling, like you said, the way to go?
Yeah. Well, right off the bat, the first thing for me is the stress and the time. So typically in my area to do a flip, with just getting zoning and permits and the time, it could take potentially 6 months plus. And then, what is the average that you're going to make on that flip? After you pay real estate agents, and these are the things that people don't think about, but after you pay real estate agents and your fees and your GCs made a mistake here and there, what are you walking away with? $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And that took 6 months plus and stress and time when I can do that in 30 days. We're making on average $15,000 to $20,000 per wholesale deal. And we're doing that in an average of 21 to 30 days. So for me personally, it just takes away the stress. Obviously, there's still stress with wholesaling, but the time frame is much, much shorter. And it just makes sense for me as opposed to doing a flip.
So your market, the Philadelphia market, I mean, Philly is one of my favorite cities, but it's a pretty unique place, right? So do you feel like that's partially a function of your market and it's kind of like, hey, it's the right fit for the market? Or do you feel like, like if I just picked you up and plopped you down in some random point in the United States, you would gravitate towards wholesaling no matter what, just because of the quality of life issues?
I think I would gravitate towards wholesaling. So, just going back how I got involved into this, my background is I came from the corporate world. So I spent, 10 plus years as a medical device rep. So, I wore the suit and tie. I drove across the entire East Coast, trying to sell products, and at the end of the day, I'm working for somebody else. All the travel, all the work, all the stress. And so, and that's what I thought I always wanted to do. But as I've gotten older and now I have a family, I realized that's not what I want to do. So I feel like what's the direction that's going to, make me the most amount of money using my skill set and with the least amount of stress. So I think if you plop me anywhere, I would probably gravitate towards wholesaling and figuring out how to make that work in any market.
So, okay. So I've got a bunch of questions about that, and I definitely want to come. You mentioned that you were recently, on a podcast. You're doing a podcast with the folks at Investor Fuse, and I definitely want to come back there because I just recently, I think the episode, by the time people are listening to this, I think the episode, the interview that I did with Dan Schwartz, I think I'm going to break that into 2 episodes. Both of those will have been out for a little bit. So remind me, I want to open that loop and come back to that. But let's talk about how you got, what made you make the jump? Because one thing to know, like, hey, I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to work for someone else. It's one thing to know you don't love the thing that you're doing. It's another thing to really make the jump into something new and specifically make that jump into real estate. So like what was driving you there? What motivated you to actually pull the trigger and make that happen?
Yeah. So just to save on time, I really got involved in real estate by accident. It really just fell on my lap. One day, my brother-in-law, I talked about how I was looking to do flips when I first got started. One day my brother-in-law calls me and he goes, "What's your credit score?" And I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I have some money, but my credit's not that great. And I'm thinking about doing some flips. And, would you want to be partners with me?" And so that's how it kind of got started with the whole real estate thing. And then, we really couldn't get any synergy going. We couldn't get anything working out. But then he started to share something about wholesaling with me, and he sent me this ebook. And Dan, I'll tell you, man, that ebook sat in my email bin for probably about a month or so.
Right.
And normally I probably would have deleted it because it came from my brother-in-law. So I'm sure you have, but
you're like, we already know this dude doesn't have a good credit score. So we're already like, I don't trust anything.
Yeah. And if he's listening to this, I love him to death. I've known him for 20 something years. So he's family at this point. But the email just sat there. And I'll be quite honest with you. I don't know what drew me to the email, but something did. And I started reading that ebook. And after I finished that ebook, I'll be honest with you, something kind of just lit a little fire in me. And also at that time, I knew that I was leaving my job. So, what was I going to do then? And this whole wholesaling thing, I really understood it all. And so I started to do a little bit of research. I started to figure out who are the players in my market. I started going to real estate networks to see the type of people that were trying to do this. And right away, I just knew that I could do it better than a lot of the other people that were already doing it. And so I spent that time when I still was employed, kind of just setting up my business. Creating a website, which I made on my own on GoDaddy, setting up social media accounts, creating business cards, doing all the things that you're supposed to do when you start any other business. I had a CRM on day one. I think I was already even doing Google ads on day one. So to answer your question, it just fell on my lap. And I really just saw that there was an opportunity. I understood it and I took action. And believe it or not, in 30 days, I had my first deal and I closed it. And I actually closed it on the same day that I was leaving my company. So the day that I met my boss at the time to give him all my stuff was also the same day that I went to the title company to pick up my first check. And I knew I had something there. So I went all in. And that was 3 years ago. So my first year wholesaling was 2016. I did a total of 8 deals. I closed a total sales volume of around, $800,000. Mm-hmm. Moving into year 2, I closed 43 deals and a total sales volume of around 9.2 million.
Wow.
And now we're in year 3. I have a full-time acquisition manager, a VA, part-time person. We should finish the year close to 60 deals closed and $10 million in revenue.
Wow. So, let me ask you, because it's interesting.
A lot of stuff there, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to kind of frame it this way. And I know it's not exactly, you guys weren't exactly doing the same thing, right? But, your brother-in-law was the one that kind of turned you on to this, right?
Right.
But it was like you're saying, when you guys were working on it together, you're having trouble kind of getting the momentum. And it seems like when you jumped into it, kind of wholeheartedly, right? You were able to really make it click in a way that it wasn't happening before. I'm curious, why do you think that was? What was the difference between how you approached it and how he was approaching it? That, you both had the same ebook, right? So it's not like the ebook was magic. So what was the missing piece there that really helped you put it together?
I think it's the same thing that stops a lot of people in their tracks. They have a job and they have bills to pay. And, a lot of people are afraid to take the chance of starting something new. And, I don't want to go back to my, all my stories, but, going back to the corporate world, I've had everything. I've had that 6-figure salary. I've had the expense report. I've had the expensive cars. I've also lost it all. And I've also tried and failed and then, gone back to the corporate world to get it all again and then tried something else again. And I think that the difference between me and my brother-in-law at that time was, he had 2 kids and he had bills and he was really kind of scared to try something new. Whereas for me, I knew I had to do something new. Otherwise, I would just be continuously in that cycle of getting a new job, doing great at it and then hating it or, and then getting fired or moving on to the next one and just being in that rat race. So I knew something had to change, right? And so just taking that action, I think is the biggest difference between us and I think for most people.
Are you an investor who wants to dominate your local market? Do you want more leads and deals online? Then download your copy of the Motivated Seller Blueprint absolutely free at www.adwordsnerds.com/gift. What are you waiting for? Go to www.adwordsnerds.com/gift right now to get your copy of the Motivated Seller Blueprint.
So let me ask you, this is just from our conversation so far, and I don't know a ton about this or about how you run your business specifically. Something tells me that you are kind of a systems person. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another reason that I jumped into this industry, with both feet, because I saw that, for example, I come from the corporate world where it's standard to have business cards and marketing material and a CRM and a website. And so I brought a lot of that, which I think is standard practice, into this industry. And whereas a lot of people don't have that background. So the transition was really, really easy for me, if that makes sense.
It does. So I'm curious, because I know a lot of people listening to this, right? Just the fact of the investing world, right, is that the vast majority of people that get started investing are going to have trouble getting their first deal, right? Much less getting 40 or right. And so when you look back, it's interesting for you too, because this is a very recent, you're not like 39 million years ago when I got started in real estate investing. Right. This is a real recent thing, right? So you came up in the same basic environment that people listening to this today are in. There's basically the same tools, except, even today, tools are much, much better, right? So looking back on those early days where you are, getting your first million, what were the systems that you were able to implement? And that, that could mean software, it could just mean a process within the business, or even a way that you think through deals or problems or whatever. What were the systems that you put in place that made that possible for you or made it easier for you?
Yeah, I think, I think the systems for me, I always try to tell people it's like building a house, right? And so what do you do when you build the house, right? You lay the framework, you put up the walls. And so that's how I kind of treated my business in the beginning. Mm-hmm. I created the website, created the marketing, created the different channels of marketing, whether it was through direct mail, whether it was through social media marketing or PPC or SEO, or putting myself out in newspapers or dropping off postcards, setting up the framework and putting up the house. And my marketing budget was really, really small. Compared to what I'm doing now. But I say this a lot: slow and steady always kind of wins the race. And I think the biggest thing for me was my mindset. I knew that the things that I was putting in place weren't going to make me any money in the next 30, 60, 90 days. They were going to make me money in month 5, 6, 7, 8. And so I was setting up my business with a long-term vision. And I think, when you're setting up your business, if you have bills to pay in the next 30 days and you're stressed out, you're going to be making different type of decisions versus planning for the long haul. So I think for me, setting up all those things in the beginning, having the CRM, having my follow-up processes, having all my social media accounts, having all that stuff in the beginning was much easier than having to do all that stuff now. Now I can just kind of slowly light fuel to the fire as I grow, which I have been, right? So every month, every quarter, every year, I have all these systems and processes in place, and now I'm just fine tuning them as I go. So I think having all of that stuff in the beginning was absolutely critical.
Yeah. And I think something that you just said is absolutely huge, which is having that time horizon where you are making the decisions that you're going to have a huge impact on you long term, right?
Yeah.
And doing the things that don't necessarily have the immediate return on investment, or they don't have a huge immediate return on investment. But it's like, hey, if I try to build this after I'm already going, it's going to kind of be too late, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also just coming from my corporate background, I would say coming from the background that I came from, most of my colleagues, I'll share with everybody, I'm 39 years old, but most of my colleagues, when I was in my corporate world, when I was in my early 20s, early 30s, most of the people I worked with were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so they had been doing this for a long time, and they had their own systems, right? Good luck trying to get them to change. And that's kind of how I view the people that are doing investing. A lot of the guys that have been doing this for a long time, they've got, Stone Age methods that they're still doing. Or the guys who say that, PPC or SEO doesn't work when they've only tried it for a month or two.
Right.
So I kind of had that background and that knowledge. And that was another reason that kind of just gave fuel to the fire for me.
Yeah.
I knew I was kind of on to something.
Yeah. It's one of those things, right? Where the deeper you are inside a system, the less likely you are to actually understand when that system changes, right? The more entrenched you are in it, the harder it is to let go of it. So let's talk marketing stuff, because it's the REI Marketing Nerds podcast after all. And I'm always really curious. So you mentioned, we'll talk about kind of where you got started and then where you're at now. So you mentioned when you got started, you didn't have much of a budget, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was your initial kind of marketing push like? How did you go out and think through the problem of getting clients? Did you start with direct mail? Did you start online? How did you think through starting that process?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I always knew that. So for me, from day one, I went all in on internet, online technology. And what I mean by that is simply that, there's you want to be everywhere. We're living in an age of technology. And so I wanted to make sure that I set all that up from the beginning. But to answer your question, I did a little bit of everything. I did direct mail in very small batches, but I did it every single month. Even if I was writing letters myself, which I was doing in the beginning, I was writing, 10 to 20 letters a day myself, as well as paying for letters to go out. I did mention to you that I was doing Google PPC and Facebook ads from the very beginning, but honestly, I was paying like $5 a day, $10 a day, but I was doing them. I was trying out newspaper ads. I did Valpak. I don't know if you know what those are. Where you get
coupons.
the the coupons in the mail.
Did that work at all? I've never met an investor who actually does that.
I don't think I did it long enough. I didn't really track it well to know how well that it worked. I will tell you that it was extremely cheap. So for the cost of it and for the amount of exposure, it's probably worth it. But I don't know if I actually got any deals from it.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I was doing everything myself. I was going to networking events, like I said, putting myself in the paper, trying different things, but trying everything, because I feel that you can't just have one type of marketing source, because what happens when that dries up, right? But I was spending about maybe anywhere from $400 to $500 a month on marketing. And as I started to close deals, that would slowly go up every quarter. So every quarter I would evaluate my marketing and then start to increase my, let's say, PPC budget from $10 a day to $15 a day, to where we are today, which is, I think we're spending total of, maybe $15,000 a month.
Yeah.
So big difference from year one, but it took 3 years for that ramp up. And I'm certainly not doing anything special or magical. I'm just following the instructions that you're supposed to do and just being consistent with it. But we're doing all kinds of marketing.
Yeah.
Things that I don't do is I don't do like bandit signs. Not that I think they don't work. I think they do work. It's just that's not the way that I want to represent my company.
Mm-hmm.
So we won't do things like that. But I pretty much do everything else. I utilize LinkedIn, BiggerPockets, all the free sources, and then, I'll pay for the rest. Facebook, Google, direct mail. But I would say 90% of my strategy is geared towards, being online. I have multiple websites. I do the blog, do SEO. So I'm all in for internet strategy moving forward.
So that's kind of brings me to my next question, which is what's working for you now. And I'm especially curious about what you see as something that's coming up or something that's improving or increasing in importance. You talked about people kind of like their Stone Age methods, but world moves really fast. And, I've talked about this on this podcast before where it's like, I started doing this, whatever it was 7 years ago, and AdWords was the only thing we needed. And we've had to continuously up our game, learn new channels, learn new things. I mean, it's never ending, right? So for you, what do you feel like is your kind of bread and butter now? And do you feel like things are changing? Do you see anything on the horizon coming up that you think is important or going to be, more important?
Well, for me, 90% of my deals and leads all come from online generation. So everything is coming from that mainly. I don't really see that changing. I do see technology being more of a play moving forward. Going back to that talk that I did at Drexel University, the other person that spoke had an opportunity to be in a meeting with Gary Keller. And I'm sure everyone knows that, Keller Williams real estate agency.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked a lot about, and he shared some of this with us. He talked a lot about how the real estate world is doing a lot to, disrupt kind of the investment world with technology and things that they're going to be offering, kind of creating, a one-stop shop moving forward. So I definitely see that, moving forward, there has to be a partnership with other brokerages or other agents or some type of leverage with technology. I don't know if I could answer that question. I still feel like I'm a newbie myself in this world, and I'm learning a lot as I go. But I'm fairly confident that whichever direction we move into, it's definitely going to be in the realm of technology and who has the most leverage and who can provide the best service. Honestly, I think a lot of other brokerages and investors will not be able to compete in that marketplace.
Yeah, I think it was Dan Schwartz. I think in our interview is talking about, investing's really moving into the age of systems where, people who have a system that can extract incremental value. If your system, extracts 0.5 units of value more than mine, over time, you're just going to eat me alive. Right. And it may seem small, but I think the disruptive force of, Zillow instant offers and Open Door and all these companies, right? They're banking on that systems process to kind of make up the difference. And I'm really curious what's going to happen. I think you're absolutely right that technology is going to be huge. I also just think that there's going to be a space that opens up for people who invest a lot in that person-to-person relationship, right? Where it's like a much higher touch process. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see kind of where it all shakes out. Well, listen, David, if people want to follow up with you and kind of learn more about you, because you're doing a lot of really interesting stuff. Where's the best place for them to find you online or learn a little bit more about PhillyHomeInvestor.com? Yeah, absolutely. The best place that people follow up about me, learn about me, or contact me, I actually have another website. You can just go to BokmanInvestmentGroup.com, and that'll tell you a little bit about me, the things that we do, all my companies, and it also links to all my different social media accounts, and as well as my personal email, I believe is at the bottom of it. Cool, man. Yeah. So everybody, if you're I don't know, a lot of people are like driving or I don't know. I always picture like people in the shower, but I think it's hard to listen to podcasts in the shower. So I don't know what's happening.
Man, I just went on to Amazon.com and the first thing that popped up was a shower speaker. So apparently that's something that I need to get. I don't know. It's telling me something.
Well, it's funny, man. It's like we must be on the same retargeting list or something. Because I've thought about that. I'm always like, I'm already like, it's like I have so little time in my day where I'm not trying to cram some kind of thing in, and I'm like, maybe it's just like. So for people who want to catch up with David, so that's BokmanInvestmentGroup.com. And you guys, if you're listening to this, Bokman is BOKMAN, investmentgroup.com. And obviously there's PhillyHomeInvestor.com, which is where one of David's websites where he's doing his investment in Philly, buying houses and all that good stuff. Hey, David, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. I couldn't be happier for you, man. It sounds like you're crushing it and well-deserved. So I really appreciate you sharing that with our listeners.
I appreciate you having me on and hopefully I was able to provide some value and hopefully somebody gets something out of it. So thank you for having me on and super humbled as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I'm glad, we can be the probably not the last stop on your whirlwind media tour of all these different podcasts and stuff. And I kind of want to, where I'm coming up on time, which is why I have to kind of shut it down. But would you be open to kind of coming back for another episode? I kind of want to dig in a little bit deeper on some system stuff. We didn't have a ton of time. Would you be open to coming back if people are into that?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I would love to share more. I know we didn't have a lot of time, but would love to be able to come back and share more info.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks again. And that was David Bokman from PhillyHomeInvestor.com and BokmanInvestmentGroup.com. David, have an awesome rest of your day, man.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks again, man.
This is the podcastfactory.com.